Welcome to Mimi Stories 256. Please like, subscribe, and comment. A like means support. Let's continue with our next chapter of The Price of Her Belonging. The little girl turned to the maid, her delicate hand gesturing toward the wardrobe. "Get my clothes ready," she ordered, her tone sharp and impatient. The maid hesitated, her eyes widening as she took a closer look at the girl's face. "Little miss, what happened to you?" she gasped, her voice trembling. "Didn't you get enough sleep?" The girl's brows furrowed, her annoyance flaring. "What do you mean?" she snapped, her voice cutting through the room like a whip. The maid wrung her hands nervously, her panic bubbling over. "Your eyes, little miss. They're bloodshot, and you have dark circles under them. Oh no, what should we do? What should we do?" Her voice rose with each word, her worry spilling out uncontrollably. The girl's lips pressed into a thin line as she strode toward her dressing mirror, her silk nightgown trailing behind her. She stopped in front of the ornate frame, her delicate fingers brushing against the edge as she leaned in to inspect her reflection. Her eyes widened in surprise as she took in the sight before her. Her usually flawless, porcelain-like face looked tired and worn. The faint shadows under her eyes stood out starkly against her pale skin, and the redness in her eyes gave her an almost haunted appearance. She tilted her head, her expression shifting from surprise to irritation. "Ugh," she muttered, brushing a golden curl out of her face. "I look awful." She turned to the maid, her glare sharp enough to make the woman flinch. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" The maid stammered, her hands trembling as she clasped them together. "I just noticed, little miss. I didn't mean to upset you." The girl rolled her eyes, her frustration mounting. "Well, you did. Now stop panicking and do something about it." She turned back to the mirror, her fingers lightly touching the dark circles under her eyes. "I can't let anyone see me like this." The maid nodded quickly, scurrying toward the vanity to gather creams and powders. "Yes, little miss. Right away, little miss," she said, her voice shaky as she worked. The girl sighed dramatically, her gaze fixed on her reflection. "This is so annoying," she muttered under her breath. "I didn't even stay up that late. Why do I look like this?" The maid glanced at her nervously, her hands fumbling with a makeup box. Maybe you were thinking too much, little miss. Sometimes that can make it hard to sleep." The girl's eyes narrowed as she turned to face the maid. "Are you saying this is my fault?" she asked, her voice dangerously low. The maid froze, her face paling. No, little miss. I didn't mean it like that. I just—" "Enough," the girl interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "Just fix it." "I have to look perfect," she murmured to herself, her voice barely audible. "If I'm going to convince Grandma, I can't look like that." The maid glanced at her, confused but too afraid to ask questions. She simply continued her work, silently praying that the little misser's mood wouldn't worsen. But as the maid carefully placed the makeup box on the vanity table, Jenny's eyes flared with sudden inspiration. She shot up from her chair, her movements sharp and deliberate. "Wait!" she exclaimed, her voice tinged with excitement. The maid froze mid-motion, clutching the edges of her apron, waiting for Jenny to continue. "I've got it. This will work just perfectly." Jenny turned to face the maid, her lips curling into a sly smile. "No need for makeup after all. It seems luck is on my side." Her voice carried a strange mix of triumph and eeriness. "God is helping me with this. No lies, no fake pretense. This is better than I planned." "But, little miss," the maid stammered, struggling to mask her surprise. "Your family will worry seeing you like this. Perhaps I should—" "I said don't bother." Jenny cut her off sharply, her tone chilling and authoritative. "Prepare my clothes. I'm going out like this." The maid nodded hesitantly, retreating to fulfill her orders. Jenny examined herself in the mirror, a mixture of satisfaction and mischief dancing in her expression. Her pale skin and somber demeanor lent her an almost ghostly appearance. But that was precisely her intention. "I look perfect," she murmured, her smile widening into something sinister. "No one will suspect." Minutes later, dressed plainly and without a trace of makeup, Jenny stepped out of her room. Her steps were calculated slowly and deliberately. As she descended the grand staircase, the echo of her heels on the polished floor seemed to announce her presence. Before she reached the sitting room, where her family was gathered, her parents and grandmother turned in unison, their eyes locking onto her figure. Jenny carried an air of melancholy. Her shoulders drooped as if weighed down by invisible burdens. "Good morning, Mom. Good morning, Dad. Good morning, Grandma," Jenny drawled, her voice soft yet laden with emotion. She slumped into her seat at the dining table, her small hands propping up her cheeks in a gesture of exhaustion. Her mother leaned forward, concern etched deeply into her face. "Jenny, sweetheart, what's wrong? You look unwell." Jenny raised her gaze briefly before dropping it again. "Nothing, Mother," she replied with detached nonchalance. "But honey," her father interjected, his voice thick with worry, "you look so pale. If you don't tell us what's bothering you, how can we?" Jenny sighed audibly, her timing impeccable. She allowed a long pause to stretch between her father's words and her response. "It's really nothing," she said finally, her voice tinged with the faintest tremble. Her grandmother, who had been quietly observing, furrowed her brows but said nothing. Jenny felt the weight of their stares. She knew her mother and father lacked authority in the household. They were pawns in her calculated game, pieces on a board she was rearranging. They weren't her target, not yet. She cast a fleeting glance toward her grandmother, her real big fish. If her bait worked, it would be her grandmother, the matriarch with unmatched power who would bite. Jenny's plan was in motion, and now it was a matter of waiting. She stole a sidelong glance at her grandmother, her gaze fleeting yet deliberate. It was a moment of calculation, one that carried the weight of her manipulative plan. Taking a shallow breath, she shifted her tone to one of feigned exhaustion and murmured, "Can we eat now? I'd like to go back and sleep for a while." Her grandmother's sharp eyes narrowed as she leaned forward, her concern blossoming into visible alarm. "No, darling," she interjected, her voice warm yet laced with unease. "How could we possibly eat when my little girl looks so unwell? Who would even have the appetite?" She paused, her expression softening into one of grandmotherly worry. "Come now, tell me what's the matter." Jenny felt a flicker of triumph deep within, though she kept her emotions firmly under control. The bait was set, and the big fish, her grandmother, had taken the hook. She couldn't afford a smile just yet, not outwardly at least. Instead, Jenny's lips twitched. A masterful performance of a child on the edge of tears. "The little devil is at it. Ha ha. Stay tuned. Just a favor to ask. Please a comment gives me more energy to continue posting. And subscribe. Tell me whatever you think. It's an episode-based story, so tell me what you want to come next."